Marjorie, we are doing a Facebook Live. The camera is there. About two things that for me I feel very passionate about. One is mindfulness, the other one is social justice. I would say social justice started before than mindfulness. But tell us about you. You're a lawyer, you're a mediator.
Yes.
Tell us about you.
My name is Marjorie Vandaw, and so I'm a lawyer, a mediator. I am passionate about social justice, like you. I am from Queens originally, so depending upon your perspective, I come from a very far away exotic place or from nearby, and I'm a member of BJ.
So tell us when this passion for social justice started in your life and how.
Well, it's difficult to trace precisely, but I in thinking about it, probably the seeds were planted when I spent a year in Israel as part of Young Judea's year course, and kind of learned about and incorporated the ideas of Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. Young Judea really instilled those values in our work all the time, and I think that is where the seed was planted. I think that being married to my husband, who has very similar values, which is a blessing, has allowed me to follow my heart that way. And I think that being part of communities like B'nai Jeshurun, and our children go to the Ethical Culture Fieldston School. Our son graduated from there, but these are communities that hold social justice really at their very center and provide opportunities all the time to engage. So together with Richard, to have this floated in front of us, it's always been attractive to me, and so I followed my heart.
So tell us a little bit what you have done in that area and in which way law and social justice intersect for you.
So I would say most recently the most active sort of engagement in social justice that I have been pursuing is with the Refugee and Immigration Committee at BJ. My husband is also involved. He not through the legal side. He's sort of taken on finding employment opportunities for refugees. But the direction that I took followed my legal background, initially noticing that there was a great need for volunteer lawyers in the nonprofit community. And I thought, well, BJ is a wonderful, large, engaged community. We must have lawyers who are willing to volunteer. And so that was how I started. As it happened, the night of our very first event, which was an asylum training for lawyers, pro bono asylum, was 2 days after our current president was elected. And we were expecting to have attrition in our attendance, but in fact we had many people who showed up who knew nothing about BJ but found us on the internet. So that was 2+ years ago, and I continued with that organizing and have not been as actively involved of late because I followed that trajectory and have started doing pro bono work for an organization called Safe Passage Project. They are dedicated to helping unaccompanied minors. So that's the work that I have been doing for the past year and a half, primarily.
And what's the work specifically?
Well, very unrelated to the work that I did when I was practicing law full-time, which was corporate work. This is asylum application and also special immigrant juvenile visa. So last month I went to court for the first time in my life. Well, I shouldn't say that. It was the second time. The first time was when I was sworn in 31 years ago. It was a great experience, a challenge, and it went well. So.
But what is the work specifically that this organization does?
Oh, okay, yes, to be more specific. So all of their clients are minors, which means they're children or teenagers, and they are young people who are in this country undocumented and who need assistance to try to normalize their status in the U.S. And so Safe Passage Project has two primary paths to try to do that for young people. One is asylum, which is probably familiar to you. That is when a person leaves their home country and comes, in this case, to the U.S. As a result of some sort of persecution or fear of persecution. And this is under international law. If the person is found to have met the criteria for asylum, then they can be permitted to stay. So that's one of the categories of work that...
So your work specifically as a lawyer is to help the person to get the asylum?
Yes. And I have been fortunate to partner with a friend of mine, Carmen Rodriguez, who's bilingual and who is, like me, a lawyer with many years' experience behind her, but who has also spent some time as a homemaker. And together we have been working on these cases, meeting with our clients and their families, and guiding them through the process. So it's been very gratifying, especially to see as time passes how these young people begin to settle in and grow into themselves, become more confident. Their English improves every month, and a relationship develops, and God willing, we'll be able to succeed. We can only do the best work that we do, and then it's out of our hands, so it's still in process, but we're working hard, and it's challenging, but it's very rewarding work.
You said that you're a lawyer and a mediator.
Yes.
So I think I know what is that. So what's the difference between a lawyer and a mediator, and which case, in which way both of those definitions help you for the social justice track that you're doing?
Okay, so a mediator, actually you don't need to be a lawyer to be a mediator. A mediator is somebody who comes to a disagreement or a dispute as a person who's attempting to help the parties come to a resolution of their disagreement. And actually, in some ways, being a lawyer makes it more challenging. I learned while I was training, because as a lawyer, you're an advocate. You're on somebody's side, and you're giving people advice. That's your job, and I did that for a long time. And as a mediator, your job is to be neutral, completely neutral. Even the way that you sit in the room and the way you turn your body can potentially show bias. So the bias is supposed to come out of it, and also really the form of mediation that I practice is, which is facilitative mediation. The idea is not to tell people what to do, but in fact give them 100% self-determination and have the parties use their creativity and the dialogue to find their own solution. So your question was, how does that connect with social justice?
No, how does it connect also with the work that you're doing? So the mediator in you is helping you more than the lawyer in you for the case of asylum seekers?
I would say that's the lawyer in me. Okay. Is doing the work, because I am an advocate in that case. I am working for my client, and my goal is to help them achieve normalized status in this country. So yes, that's more, although it's different because litigation is very different than I used to write contracts. That's handy in my mediation work. So it's a nice skill to have. And I'm learning the litigation, and I have been so impressed with our supervising attorneys at Safe Passage Project. They carefully review everything we do, and they give us guidance going into court, and all of the sort of etiquette around that, and they read our papers very carefully. So they're pros. I feel very lucky to be working under them.
What do you think the drive to do social justice work comes from?
I guess, as I said about Young Judea, I think that instilled in my Jewish background this sense of wanting to leave the world a little bit better than I found it, and that just feels like the way I want to be spending my time. And also I think I love people, so I enjoy meeting people, and I enjoy meeting different people, and so it's what I'm drawn to. It's the work that I want to be doing, and it's just very organic for me.
So in your case is your values. The case of Jewish Judaism, it could be Christianity, a value system.
Absolutely.
That is supporting that, and then an authentic love for humanity, for human beings.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would say that through this work, Richard and I have met wonderful people within our congregation, within the extended Jewish community, but also very much outside of the Jewish community, who are doing this work. We have, in particular, have been working very closely with people from Rutgers Presbyterian Church, and our values they're aligned. Our values and our goals are so aligned. So that's been gratifying.
So since this is a spiritual conversation, I understand the complications, the political implications of all this. They are very, very complex. But what do you think is more the human barrier for this issue? If you could nail, from the social justice perspective, you're talking about the love for people. So the people who are doing this are people who don't have love for people, don't have love for humanity, so we cannot also generalize that. So what is the human obstacle?
You're talking about the immigration issue.
In this case, yes. Asylum seekers, as we were talking the other day, my daughter is now helping in Tijuana and in Mexico, and she tells me the horror stories and the possible separation between parents and children, and the tragedy of what they're leaving behind, the gang problem, the government issues, the persecution, the fear of what may come. I mean, a desperate situation. So what is the enemy? I'm not looking for a person. I'm not looking. What is it? Is human what? The enemy.
I think the enemy is distance to me. The enemy is that when you don't know those people, and when I say those people, which it sounds very negative, but I mean people who are different from us, people who come from a different place, come from a different culture. And I don't mean us per se, I mean the people who aren't feeling that the way that we are feeling that compassion and that concern. I think that there are people who just, maybe they're living in a place where they're not meeting people who come from other places where their lives have been so challenged and their basic needs are not being met. Because I cannot imagine a human being who would be faced with another human being with needs, with basic needs, and not feel that pull. And so unfortunately, I think there's just distance, and the question is, how can that be bridged?
So distance, you're saying ignorance also, because they don't know that?
Well, I guess. I mean, ignorance is a very loaded word, so I'm trying actually not to
say more.
Use that word,
say
because
more.
I think that that's a very judgment-filled word. So I think that they haven't had experience. I have to believe that. I just have to believe that.
But the issue of the distance is a way of saying this is happening to them, it's not happening to me. So it's also the otherness of the other.
Absolutely.
The otherness of the others also is what feeds racism and
absolutely.
And many other things, many other evils that we have in the society, because it's an other, it's not me, and it's far from me.
Right. I think that's the case, and perhaps it's the more generations you're separated from the people in your family who came to this country, because everybody came to this country at one time or another. You know, how many generations. What's been interesting for me in doing this work is that when I started, I didn't come to it with a strong feeling of connection to my grandparents who were immigrants, because I never knew them. But as I have come to know my clients and other people, and to really understand the experiences that they're having, leaving their homes, leaving their homes, leaving their cities or villages, often their families, and coming here with very little and starting over, that has actually caused me, for the first time in my life, to really think about my grandparents. That's only, 2 generations away, and to think about what their experience must have been like.
In today's categories, how would you define your grandparents? They were refugees? They were...
I don't even know. Let's see. They were fleeing the pogroms. So I guess you would call them refugees when they came into this country. And had most of their children here. I had one uncle who was born somewhere in Russia.
So today, that's something that informs you. So today we have to, in the work that you do, differentiate between asylum seekers and documented migrants. What other categories are there of?
Okay, so I'll try to do my best with this. It's so confusing, but okay. So undocumented means somebody who's in this country who has no status whatsoever, and who is either known to the government or not known to the government, but who, if they are picked up by ICE for one reason or another, are subject to deportation. And within that category are young people who have DACA status, which is a temporary, status to be here, and which is meant to be relief from being an undocumented person. So for now, that's in place, and hopefully hopefully those people will be ultimately normalized in their status here, because they've known nothing else. And then asylum seekers are people who are coming from situations that I described before, where they are fleeing persecution or fear of persecution for all sorts of reasons, whether it's based on their religious beliefs, their sexual orientation, their race, and then a broad but very important category, which is particular social group, which would pick up people, actually that would pick up sexual orientation and many other, like people fleeing because of gang violence, people who are fleeing because of, let's say, indigenous status in countries and are treated differently, women, people who are suffering from domestic violence, who suffered back in their home country. So there's large categories, many categories underneath that. And refugees are people who are in this, for the same reasons, are leaving their country of origin, but who have overseas been deemed to have met that standard and have that legal classification given to them.
Because in the case of the Syrians who have escaping Syria because of the civil war, we talk about refugees. That's the only category that we apply to them. It's because of their fleeing a civil war, basically. That's the difference. Let me shift now to the issue of mindfulness. So you just came back from the BJ Mindfulness Retreat in Costa Rica that Karina, Sol, and myself will lead there. So how was that for you? And what's the intersection between the work that you do and you found, between the work that you do and the mindfulness experience?
That's a wonderful question. Because it gives me a chance to talk about the retreat, which was a wonderful week. And I have to say that when I signed up for the retreat and I went, it was a bit of a leap of faith. I really didn't know what to expect, and I was not a mindfulness practitioner before I went, but I had a feeling that it could be a really wonderful experience, and it was special. It was really special. So what was so incredible? First of all, it was in a gorgeous place in nature, in the mountains, the retreat center, Montaña Azul, delicious food, healthy food, vegetarian, gluten-free, magnificent birds and plant life and flowers. Wow, the flowers. So the setting was dreamlike. But what was really dreamlike about it was the sense of community that you created on this retreat with our group of 18 participants, many of whom, I'd say maybe most of whom, I might never have met or might never have even had any, connection with in my life. And by spending the time together, sometimes in silence, in prayer, singing, dancing, eating together, hiking, and with Karina's warmth and her incredible music, and Sol's movement and dance and the freedom of that, we just came together as a group of people and connected in remarkable ways. It was like summer camp, but much better than summer camp, because we're adults and we don't get these opportunities, and also because there was a safety in that group that you created, and a warmth that was really remarkable. And in particular, I loved the way that we had the opportunity to look inward, and also had the invitation from you to share, but only to the extent that we really wanted to. So there was no pressure. There was no pressure to kind of trot out our personal business if we didn't want to. But as the week progressed, and we all got closer and closer, some of us shared more than others, but we all became like family. It was a really beautiful experience. A lot of hugging. Much hugging.
Yes. I love hugging.
I would encourage anybody who's even thinking about it to really treat yourself to an experience like this. It was wonderful.
And in which way relates to the issue of social justice? Because this is something that with my beloved friend Rachel Cowan, we talk and we taught together for so many years. We spoke about this many times, because people say if you're really into social justice, you cannot be into mindfulness. It's not about being inside, it's being outside. We never understood the tension between the two. So how that related for you, or in which way one informed the other?
Well, I'd say, to actually go straight to that so that I don't overlook it, I would say that in practicing this mindfulness, there's a sense of turning inward and really going deep within yourself and finding what's most important to you. So one is just reconnecting with your most deeply held values. And that's always a good thing to do. That's always important. And in terms of the tension, I would say that in taking that time and in learning how to take time, and it really, one of the things that I took away from it was a deeper understanding of the value of Shabbat, of what Shabbat can be, which is taking time away and stopping everything and just being inwardly reflective and doing that for yourself as a gift to yourself. And so definitely when you care about social justice, it feels like the work is never done. It feels like there's like the mountain, it's Sisyphean. Can I say that word? Did I say that? It feels like you'll never get there. And it's very soothing to be able to say to yourself, okay, maybe I don't have to get to the top of the mountain. It's, the climb is worth it, and then I can rest and I can take care of myself and restore myself, and that will make me better at what I do. I don't know if that makes any sense. But I think also implicit in that is a sense of forgiveness. Forgiveness of oneself for taking that time, but as a way to be selfish in a healthy way, and then of course forgiveness of others. Learning to be open to thinking about, or really to let go of things that, petty grievances and irritations. It's just, who needs that? It's not enough time.
No. One of the things that also with Rachel, all the time we were talking about part of mindfulness is to embrace what it is, and not to engage with thoughts and with feelings, and to be able to choose the story. And of course, in the moment that we are being mindful. And that could look like a contradiction with the idea of being an advocate, with the idea of presenting arguments, with the idea of presenting a case. So, as a lawyer, as a mediator, as somebody who was exposed to mindfulness, in which way the two come together?
Well, I think that the mindfulness values, the mindfulness tenets, line up perfectly with mediation. And also, in many cases, also with practicing law well. For example, the deep listening, the skill of deep listening. I mean, no matter what you do, frankly, deep listening will make you better at whatever you do. So that is, I'm thinking about the different values. So there was the deep listening. There was the suspending of judgment. Well, that for sure is mediation, and frankly, it can also be the case as an advocate, because when you're advocating for somebody, you're understanding the facts, you're marshaling them in favor of your client, and there may be times when you have to not judge. You know, you really don't know. You haven't walked in that person's shoes. So again, you know, suspending judgment, I think, is just helpful in many of, you know, most of these situations. I have to think about my other values from mindfulness. Feel free to help me.
What about the issue of equanimity? You know, people think that meditation is about finding peace. It's not about finding peace. It's about living in the present with all the contradiction and not to fall apart. So that's what we could define as equanimity. So what about the idea of equanimity confronting evil, confronting a terrible situation, confronting something that has to be changed for the sake of saving somebody's life, or for trying to meet this father with this son who they don't know where they are, you know, to find them. So how equanimity would you say play a role there?
I think equanimity is, again, it's strength. It is strength. I think just this morning, I actually I did a case this morning, and I was writing the contract up for a mother on behalf of her child, and she was impatient, and she was sitting very close to me, and she couldn't wait to get out of there. And I'm thinking, what I'm doing here is to protect her child, and I needed to just, you know, center, stay focused, not be distracted, and get that job done. I think in the case of, like, as you're describing, what I think about often are how many people are so concerned, rightfully so, about what's happening in our country, and the people who are being deprived of their human rights, of their civil rights. I mean, the list is long. And I know that at least one of the people who are in our group, but it doesn't matter whether you're on the group or not. If you are so upset, now I remember who it is, and it is from our group. If you are so upset that you can't center yourself and bring yourself to action, then all you're doing is being upset, mm-hmm. right? And you're not accomplishing anything. And this is not meant to criticize, because it's a difficult moment in our country. But if you can bring yourself to some equanimity, then you can have the presence to really think, where can I make a difference? What can I bring to the table? And there are so many things that a person can do. And then you can be effective in some way.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the difference or the tension between righteous indignation and anger, because we have to have we have the right to having righteous indignation, to say this is wrong, and we have to do something. Another thing is to act from anger, and anger will make you like this woman, like this, and maybe you're just venting your anger, and maybe your anger could make you do things that are wrong, and you cannot think straight. So righteous indignation and anger are not the same. So righteous indignation is the power to confront evil, what we define as evil, and anger is anger. It's just something that takes our soul and doesn't make us free, doesn't make us think freely.
Right. It's hard to think, it's hard to reason when you're deeply angry. Actually, I have like a personal policy. When I'm that angry, I give myself a timeout. Which obviously in life these things happen. But righteous indignation is what can fuel your energy and your power and your strategic thinking. So, yes, absolutely, engage. It's very important to engage.
Is there any final words about this intersection between social justice and mindfulness that we're talking about?
Yes, there is, which is to say that to encourage whoever is watching, that if you feel that you don't have social justice, some experience of social justice in your life, I want to encourage you to think about how you can engage. And it can be in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be a huge commitment of your time. It can be being part of a movement. Community organizing is powerful. So connecting in some way. And if you are interested in engaging on a personal level, and in fact giving time, it can look like anything. I mean, think about your skills and your aptitudes, but also think about things that you don't have a chance to do. Meeting people and getting out there. In this case, this was something that I was drawn to. But there's so many ways to engage, and including giving money, even small amounts of money. Every small amount of money is a drop, and the drops gather. And so everybody can make a difference. And so I think really think about what you care about and jump in.
Thank you, Marjorie. So let me just stop the video, and I want to say thank you to you, and thank you to everybody who is watching.